Book 4. 1. The deeds of Leontergus and those who reigned after him, and the crimes of the Biblians, for a long time without anyone ruling. As well as the colonies established in Arabia and Phoenicia by the shepherds driven from Egypt, are described in the third book. But Sanchuniathon continues his narration in these words. At the same time the islanders, carrying and acting, landed, and attacked the cities situated by the sea, and wherever they found them, they desecrated the sanctuaries of Saturn. But Barcas, the founder of the city of Bethataba, drew up a large army to meet those who were breaking into his own borders, and he added to his army the auxiliary forces of 10 kings. But when they joined hands, both Barcas himself and all his allies were killed. This battle was fought in the field of the Bethatabians, where even in our own times the tombs of the kings are seen. But the Biblians, when they had heard that the kings had been defeated at Bethataba, prepared their arms with the greatest speed. For the enemy had already approached across the plain to attack the city. But the Bibli inflicted a great slaughter on the enemy, using the example of Jabes, disturbing the ranks of the islanders. Finally, however, wounded, he sat down on a rock, which is still seen bleeding, but the surrounding places, sprinkled with his blood, were always green. In this battle 10,000 of the enemy were killed. Jabes built a temple to Saturn in the plain where the battle was fought, not far from the citadel of the Egyptians. But after he had reigned 60 years, he died in extreme old age. 2. After Jabad died, Bimelus, king of the Sidonians, sent Rabathus his son to the Bibli, and requested that they make him their king, as he had already made Beradad king of the Berathians. For when the king of the Berathians was dead, and the citizens were fighting among themselves for the kingdom, Bimelus sent them Beradad's son to be their king. When the citizens refused to receive him, the Sidonians besieged the city by land and sea, and, having conquered that country, handed over the kingdom to Beradad. Bimelus therefore sent Rabathus to the Bibli, but the Bibli, mindful of the subjugation and seeing the army of the Sidonians and Berathians approaching, voluntarily received the king whom Bimelus had sent to them. Without anyone objecting, Rabathus entered the city with a force of 1,000 Sidonian Hastadich men. He held the empire for 30 years. 3. When this whole region was oppressed by a great famine, especially the towns situated by the sea, Bimelus led the colonists to a colony which was 2 days' journey from Byblos, and which was called Aradi, from Arad, the son of Bimelus, whom he had made king of the town. Bimelus also subdued the giants who inhabited Lebanon, and left Melcaram, his son-in-law, king of Lebanon and Celesyria. In this way Bimelus ruled over all the towns by the sea and the inland lands as far as the Orontes river. When the king of the Tyrians saw this, who was now old and bereft of children, he of his own accord sent ambassadors to offer the kingdom of Tyre to the youngest son of Bimelus. All these kings, both in the coastal and inland cities, had Bimelus as their lord. 4. Bimelus also led a large army to besiege Amathi, because the Amathi had sent aid to those who had defected from Melcaram in Celesyria. He himself had with him 10,000 Sidonians. In this expedition 8,000 Tyrians, 3,000 Berathians, 6,000 Biblians, 2,000 Aradians came to his aid. There were also 1,000 archers from the islands, and 100 chariots had been sent by the Onachines. He therefore crossed the mountain with 30,000 armed men, in order to make a surprise attack on the enemy, who had pitched camp in the plain. But about 50,000 men came to the aid of the Amathites from all over Syria, and they greatly despised Bimelus. But when the scythe carriages, which the Onachines had brought with them, caused the greatest destruction, they fled as quickly as they could, and did not stop in flight until they reached their own city. In this battle of the enemy 10,000 were killed, and 16,000 were captured, but the magnitude of the booty is beyond belief. Then, attacking Amathia, Bimelus forced the king to cede possession of the entire region to Melcarimo. But to Damascon, who had brought the auxiliary forces of the Onasans, he gave the field where the battle was fought, and he founded the largest and most famous city of Damascus. After this everyone returned home, and this battle is still celebrated in songs. 5. Damascus, the leader of the charioteers, was originally from Egypt. But the exile fled with his companions to Onosini, where enmity arose between him and Caranus Saratus, king of Gaza. For when Damascus heard that his brother had been murdered in the mountains, he went up to the dead man, weeping and saying nothing. The voice of a man who is sorry for his brother's fall resounds in the forest. The mountaintops hear nonsense, and the rocks resound. Arise, O brother, for it is not time for sleep. Let us go, that we may bring comfort to our mother. But she neither hears me calling, nor sees me weeping. The boy, your brother, came to me, saying, he was devoured by wild beasts at the roots of the mountain. But when I came near, I found a wound in his face, a sword wound. But I know well him who murdered his brother. For you killed Caranus unarmed with a sword. But you will find me armed. Then he buried his brother and gathered the forces of the Amorians and Onosans to attack the Gazans, and after a battle in the urban area, he put Caran to flight. For when he sent out scythe-drawn chariots against the enemy, he either killed or captured many of the enemy. Having summoned chariots from Egypt, he struck fear into all his neighbors. For the ruler of all in Phoenicia and Syria had scythe-drawn chariots. But when he had brought aid to Byblius, he similarly equipped his chariots with scythes, put the enemy to flight, and founded the city of Damascus. These things are described in the book on warriors. 6. Now all the neighbors, having become aware of this victory of the Sidonians, sent many and excellent gifts to Byblius. But the islanders also sent ambassadors to the Sidonians about restoring the temples and altars of Saturn. They also released the captives whom they had taken away from the coastal cities. Therefore, having made alliances, Byblius equipped a large fleet in order to arrange garrisons on the islands. The leaders of the Sidonians also set out with a fleet for Tartessus and entered into an alliance with the Tartessians. 7. Byblius founded 10 colonies and distributed 1,000 colonists to each of them, and the colonies were adorned with a harbor and a citadel, to repel the enemy. But when the barbarians happened to attack a certain colony, the ships that were kept ready for sailing at each colony informed the Sidonians of the war. He founded the prince's colony on the island of Siti, where Demerun had already founded a city, which, however, the mountaineers had recently devastated. He also established a colony in those parts of the island that face westward, but one on the island of Rhodes, and 3 in that tract which is opposite Rhodes. He later founded a city in Sorati, as also in the island of Miletus, and 2 in Ursiphonia. These are the 10 colonies founded by Byblius. Now the city which was founded in Sorati, when it flourished in a short time with the greatest number of inhabitants, brought the abundance of people to an island situated nearby. Who founded there a large and wealthy city. The temple they built there in honor of Astartes was endowed with great splendor. 8. Having thus obtained the dominion of the sea, he also destroyed the sea robbers. But when each year thousands of talents returned from the cities, he became very rich and was in greater power than all who had ever held the dominion of the Sidonians. For he had 100,000 soldiers and 100 chariots, 70 long ships, and countless freighters. When he left home, he sat in a magnificent chariot, dressed in purple clothes. And 1,000 guards preceded him, each with silver breastplates. But he died after he had reigned for many years. 9. When he died, the kings of the cities created a great king, Rabbathus, who had previously been king of the Biblians. After Rabbathus had reigned 30 years in Byblus, he went to Sidon and became the greatest king, and left Barsadus king in Byblus, a most noble man, whose brother, since he excelled in insolence. The citizens murdered. Now, when Barsadus had held the kingdom for 18 years, the greatest war of the Sidonians against the giants arose, and as Rabbathus happened to be sick at the same time. Barsadus was created leader of all the aid collected from all the cities. The son of Damascus was also present with 200 chariots. But when the battle was fought at the foot of the mountain, the Sidonians first fled, and the giants pursued them. But the giants, seeing the chariots scythed, who had arrived in the meantime, for the Syrians were prevented from crossing the mountain by heavy and constant rains, fled as quickly as possible to the summit of the mountain. But the first to conquer the unconquered until our times was Cusabas, the son of Ochalathon, who built an altar to Saturn and a field and consecrated a forest to him, from which the priests could take food. But Barsadus, wounded in battle, soon died. His son Obdobaltus, who is also called Obdastartes, assumed the kingdom. 10. Rabathus also died, after he had reigned among the Sidonians for 30 years. But he reigned altogether 60 years among the Sidonians and the Byblians. Belirus Rabathi succeeded to his empire. Now Belirus, as is described in the Book of Brave Men, waged war for a long time with the Teartessians, in order to subdue their territories, but he was defeated and said this nothing. Rich Sidon, did the sea throw you, a pearl, onto the shore, or did you descend from heaven, a bright star? With your splendor the Mediterranean region is illuminated, and the sea shines with its cheerful beauty. Queen of the waves, you have those who sail past as your subjects, and you are a most happy mother, rejoicing in the sight of your children. But as you look from afar, tears will flow from your cheeks, moistening the earth, and the sea will resound with a mournful song, for the long ships were broken in the borders of the Teartessians. And the bravest of your sons died on a far distant shore. After this, Belirus ruled the Sidonians for 45 years. 11. After Barsadus died, Obadus was king of the Byblians, who was at war with the Berythians. Belirus sent ambassadors to him about settling the war. During this war the Byblians attacked Berythians, but hearing that the islanders had gone ashore, they returned home with great speed. But having returned ashore in haste, they were said to have dug up many riches, which they were to dig up at the time when peace was made with the Berythians. Therefore, a multitude of the Berythians gathered at the foot of the mountain, eager for those riches, and arrived at the place mentioned, but digging they found nothing, although they searched everywhere. But since there were rains and storms, they were completely soaked. It happened that the evening breeze was damp and very cold. Therefore, having suffered much, having accomplished nothing, they returned angry. But on their return, a certain man slipped and felt a wooden box in the mud. They found the cask heavy and believed it contained gold and pure silver or gold and silver vessels, so that each of those who had undertaken the expedition would receive the greatest wealth. They therefore decided that the cask should be brought to the city as quickly as possible, lest they should be crushed by the enemies on the plain if they were delayed in distributing it. Now they were carrying the basket on 4 shoulders. But there were those who wanted to carry it as well, and they tried to remove those who were carrying the cask, and to carry it in their place. But when they resisted, many were wounded. Therefore the general, who, in order to settle the discord, immediately ordered the wealth to be divided, shouted and smashed the cask. Then many were filled with great anger. For the cask, which they had believed to be full of gold, contained flints and clay, and when it was opened, the Bereans thought that they had been deceived by the enemies. And they were very angry on this account, and also because they were ridiculed by those who had remained in the city. And this matter became a proverb. For the Berythians are said to have clay for gold. 12. At the same time, for it is fitting for us to mention all that is worthy of remembrance, Cadmius and Anabius and Ascabarathon and some others sailed to Tartessus, more than 30 of them, all born in Byblos. But since they had a pilot who was not skilled in navigation, they went astray, and they do not know where they are. For this reason they first wanted to throw the pilot into the sea. But when he fell at their feet and begged him to forgive him, they gave him leave. And after sailing around for a long time, they were filled with great joy. when they saw the shore, and the town situated in the Mediterranean region. They had arrived at Tenga, but they did not know it. So they sent 6 men to explore this region and its inhabitants. The townspeople, however, when they saw them come up to them and sell the grain with which the ship was loaded, were overjoyed, because the whole region was suffering from a very serious famine. And they sent out fishing boats to pull the ship into port. When they noticed this crowd of Bybli rushing up with a loud cry, they believed them to be enemies, and, leaving 6 of them, they set sail again, and sailing towards the region of Corinne. They were pressed for 5 days by the greatest want. For the heat of the sun had broken all the barrels that contained water, and there was a great shortage of water, and they almost perished from thirst. And if any one had saved urine to quench his thirst, another stole it from him and drank it, from which arose great quarrels. 13. Worried by this anxiety, they repented of having fled from the town, and going out to the shore, having pierced the ship and cast it ashore, they spread the salt of the sea. For the sea water had congealed on the shore by the heat of the sun. Sometimes they even went down naked into the sea, because of the summer heat, and having cooled themselves with lotions, they continued their journey, in order to investigate the water and the men. But then the skin of their feet was scorched, and they were consumed by thirst, and they bore no resemblance to men. Indeed, they were so weak that 2 of those who had gone up to the spring to investigate fell, as did some of those who had set out on the shore. Finally, they found a fruit-bearing tree and were overjoyed at the sight of the beautiful fruits. But when they discovered that these were bitter and that the juice caused ulcers around the mouth, they were greatly affected by the greatest dejection of mind and despair of all things. 14. But suddenly they saw sailors on the high sea, whom they called by signs. When they arrived, they were astonished at the country of the Imercesinians, from whence men had come to these places. But the Bybli, using a barbarous language, made a sign with their hands that they had left some on the shore, who would easily perish. But they returned and found those whom the Bybli had left already dead. Then they led the crowd to a certain lake, where one died after drinking the water immoderately. Then the Imercesinians restrained the rest from drinking too much. But afterwards they returned to the wrecked ship, and took away the weapons and vessels, but left the wheat. 15. They took the Biblians with them to the island of Imercecina, and when they had realized that they were not pirates, but merchants, and had become more certain of their misfortunes and errors, they did not kill the captives, but had pity on them, and awarded them the weapons and vessels that they had taken from the ship, if they would swear by the gods that they were all their own. But when the islanders searched everything, they found, among other things, many written books, in which, having seen the image of Astartes bearing horns, they believed that they were magical books. For they attribute horns to evil demons, but they were inexperienced in the art of writing. Therefore, frightened, they agitated this matter with speeches and sent the books and the men bound to Cyrene, an island not far away, where there was a king, who also lacked experience in writing, but nevertheless refused to kill men who had been in no way convicted of any evil deed. Finally, he found an old man who was very skilled in our language and in the art of writing, which he had learned as a boy among the Artesians. From this time on, the king and the leaders of the city, after an interval of 3 days, sat by the mouth of the 3 men, turning the book over. And they derived the greatest pleasure from it, especially from the story of the young man. When this book was turned over, the king was eager for the explanation of the rest, in which the deeds of the gods were described, as well as the poems of Nama. Having examined which, the old man hastened to the captives of Byblius, and, if I were to explain everything as it is, he said, we would all certainly be lost, he and you too. Then a great outcry arose among them. But he pitied them, and by omitting some things, and by softening the translation in others, he helped the advantage of the Byblius. When the recitation was over, the king said that they were good men, who neither practiced magical arts nor made familiar use of demons. 16. Having suffered great pains, they were finally freed from custody. All the islanders provided them with sufficient food, especially a certain aged widow. But Anabius, a jocular man, when he had once received a gift from her, said to her, "If you had known how wicked I am, you would certainly have given me nothing." But she did not understand these words, but thought that Anabius, who was looking at her with a grave face, was thanking her. The rest, however, rebuked her most severely. For what would they suffer if she happened to understand the language of the Bible? 17. Now the widows mentioned above were spending the night in the shelter. But now, since they did not know whether they should remain on the island for the rest of their lives or not, they chose a ship for themselves from among those of which there was a multitude at the shelter, and they departed. The rest had all now boarded the ship, but one was left, who, since he could not see the sun because of the darkness, shouted, "Goodbye." When some of the Emerchicinians heard this, they believed that thieves were present, or that they were going to harm the sheep, and for this reason the Biblians with the greatest speed took themselves back to their shelter. For if they had been caught in flight, it was likely that they would all have been slaughtered. Then again they were in great sorrow for a long time, because they were held captive and could not escape, and they burned with the greatest desire for their country, women and children. Finally, those who were already alive were sent by the islanders to Tartessus, and from there, having suffered many and terrible things for a long time, they returned to Byblus, where they found men left behind in Tenga, who themselves had also been in great distress. The last of these, Baladanus, died, but of those who had been on the island, Anabius, an old man indeed, but weakened by many labors and hardships, so that horns a finger long grew on his fingers. 18. In the extreme west of Emerchicina are the islands, the last of which is 10 days' journey from the Cape of the Winds, Hyaza, Hierizima, Igidula and others. In very ancient times they were inhabited by many people. But Aniphas, king of Hyaza, made an incursion into Hierizima, which, since it was undefended, he easily subdued with many forces. Afterwards he also killed the remaining kings, and conquered all the islands. But when his enemies were defeated, he despised them all, so much so that he made little of even the gods. Then there arose earthquakes, and showers, and fire from heaven, by which both the king and many of the inhabitants perished. The rest fled to other regions, so that in our own times the islands are deserted to men. There are high mountains there, but the highest is in the island of Hyaza, always spewing fire. All this is described in the Book of Errors. 19. Now Belirus built a school not far from his city, where the boys of the priests were educated, and were instructed in the sacred rites, and in the art of law and medicine. But he died after a reign of 45 years.